Bam! There we go. Nice setup today. Yeah, that'll work. All right. I thought I'd make a little comparison thing today, and I've got a great article by Walter Kennedy of the Kennedy twins. You may know The South Was Right, best-selling books. And it's called Lincoln, Putin, and the Yankee Hypocrisy. I'd read this to you. This is very well done. On how people think about secession, or what sometimes they call annexation. There's no consistency. Who has the right to do what? I always thought it was something that, the U.S. can secede from Britain, but states within the U.S. can't secede. So, okay, Kennedy writes, a little bit of phlegm, sorry. At the writing of this article, the ongoing struggle between Ukraine and Russia has most people's attention. While prayerfully hoping for a peaceful settlement of this conflict, it is difficult to overlook the actual hypocrisy of the federal government and U.S. media as they deal with the report issues such as saving the Union, secession, and war crimes. Yeah, Lincoln was guilty of war crimes. It is the purpose of this article to expose the Yankee hypocrisy as it relates to these issues and not to suggest support for one or the other belligerents in this most unfortunate war. Fine. A brief historical background is helpful to better understand this conflict. One would think, right? The histories of Russia and Ukraine are very closely related. Around 862 AD, the Rus people settled in what is now Ukraine. From this settlement, the nations of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine can trace their beginnings. Today, the language of these three nations is very similar, and they share a common attachment to the Russian Orthodox Church. Depending on how one judges the beginning of Russia and Ukraine, their history predates the United States anywhere from 300 to 900 years. This Eastern European people possesses a long and complicated history. Therefore, it is difficult to make definitive statements on the correctness of either party's position in this conflict. Remember that the political establishment that promised "read my lips, no new taxes" lied. The same political establishment who promised shovel-ready jobs lied. The political establishment that assured America that the Iraqi war was necessary because of weapons of mass destruction were proven wrong. The same government media that promised the face mask would protect you from viruses were wrong. In any case, is it any wonder that, according to a recent Gallup poll, 64% of Americans have no faith in the media's fairness? At only 18% approval, the federal government's approval rating is even lower than the media's pitiful rating. 18%. Americans appear to trust a used car salesman more than they trust the government or the media. We would be careful about adopting the talking points of such underrated groups as the media and the federal government. Using current events, let's look at how the current war of March 2022 exposes Yankee hypocrisy. Three areas of Yankee hypocrisy will be addressed. 1, the war to save the Union in both Lincoln's war and the current war. 2, both Lincoln and Putin's support for secession and rejection of secession. And 3, Lincoln, Putin, and Ukraine war crimes. All right. Stinking Lincoln believed the federal government had the right to use any method to save the Union. Today, when Putin declares that he only desires to secure the Union for traditional Russia, the Yankee Empire pronounces Russia as an aggressor nation. Yet in 1861, the federal government, in an aggressive move, invaded a sovereign nation, the Confederate States of America, and did to the South the very same thing they are condemning Putin for doing. The American sadist acts committed by Lincoln during the federal government's invasion, conquest, and occupation of the Confederate States of America. Right, so the press condemns Putin for doing all he has in his power to save the Union for Russian people while glorifying the sadist acts by Lincoln. Since the states of the Union had up until Lincoln's election been denoted as free, independent, and sovereign states, Lincoln had much less right to invade the 13 southern states than Putin had to invade Ukraine. Another example of Yankee hypocrisy. In March 1836, Texas declared secession from Mexico. The United States not only supported that secession movement, but in 1845, Texas was admitted to the Union. By the way, Lincoln personally supported that secession movement. Odd, too, because Robert E. Lee helped fight and win the Mexican War. 16 years later, that same federal government that supported Texas secession from Mexico opposed Texas secession from the federal union. In 1903, 67 years after supporting Texas secession from Mexico and 42 years after denying Texas the right to secede from the federal union, the federal government supported secession of Panama from Colombia. Theodore Roosevelt championed this secession in order to secure the Isthmus of Panama to build the Panama Canal. Remember, Putin asserts that he has the right to preserve the historical, cultural, and religious homeland of the Russian people. In a similar vein, Lincoln asserted that he had the right to preserve the Union because of its historic roots in all the territory of the Union. Here we see an example not only of Yankee hypocrisy, but also Yankee arrogance. When Yankees support and oppose secession depending on when it benefits the Yankee Empire, this is an example of Yankee hypocrisy and Yankee arrogance. The political leadership of the federal government, fully backed by the media, congratulates Ukrainian secession from Russia, from Russian influence, while rejecting the right of the people of eastern Ukrainian region of Donbass to secede from Ukraine. The people of Donbass region are decidedly in favor of either independence from what they consider a corrupt and discriminatory Ukraine government or outright annexation, like Texas in 1845, to Mother Russia. Here again, we see the Yankee hypocrisy at work. While congratulating Ukraine's secession from Russia, they are condemning Donbass region and other regions from seceding from Ukrainian rule. While approving Texas annexation to the United States in 1945, the Yankee Empire arrogantly denies the same right of annexation of the pro-Russian people of Donbass and of the Donbass region. Unlike the days before camera phones and the internet and the heroes of modern warfare are daily brought into our homes, without a doubt, much civilian death and suffering has been caused in the Ukrainian war. In the predominantly Russian eastern provinces, similar attacks upon pro-Russian inhabitants go unreported. According to a report in The Citizen published February 2022, as many as 9,000 civilians from the Donbass region have been killed as a result of the effort to prevent the secession of Donbass from Ukraine. This number includes many children. Unfortunately, these statistics are considered Russian disinformation by our own government and media. You know, the folks that are so trustworthy themselves. As usual, the truth is the first victim of war, of any war. While the federal government and its media lackeys are quick to condemn the death and suffering of Ukrainian victims of war, they extol and praise Lincoln's rabble that committed even more hideous crimes against the civilian population of the Confederate States of America. I note that they don't care about the death and suffering of ethnic Russians either. As one historian noted, warning against non-combatants came to be the state policy and practice of the United States as they attempted to subdue the Confederate States of America. As this historian noted, it became Lincoln and the United States' practice of shelling and burning of cities, forced expulsions, wholesale plundering, and even murder all became routine. 1864, General Sherman laid siege to Atlanta, Georgia. Sherman aimed 223 cannon toward the city and proceeded to fire upon the defenders, as well as the women and children of Atlanta. One Atlanta surgeon noted that during the shelling he had performed 107 amputations on men, women, and children. Yes, children did not escape the wrath of this Yankee butcher. It was Sherman who, speaking of Southerners, said, "There is a class of people, men, women, and children, who must be killed or banished before you can hope for peace and order." Sherman also said that for those who believe in secession, death is mercy, and the quicker he or she is disposed of, the better. When secession is good for the Yankee Empire, they support it, but when it is not good for the Yankee Empire, they oppose secession. More Yankee hypocrisy. Sherman had the same philosophy on American Indians. Only good Indian's a dead Indian. The political establishment informs Americans that we should be outraged at the thought of Putin shutting down opposition newspapers or imprisoning political opponents, something Zelensky also did, by the way. They condemn Putin's actions while overlooking the CIA's role in overthrowing a democratically elected Ukrainian president. Well, talk about Yankee hypocrisy. During Lincoln's invasion of the Confederacy, all civil rights and constitutional protections were canceled for citizens of the South who, according to Yankee logic, were still citizens of the Union. But how did Lincoln treat his political opponents in the North? Lincoln shut down over 300 newspapers, illegally suspended the writ of habeas corpus, censored telegraph communications, illegally created the state of West Virginia, and opened and read private mail, imprisoned political opponents. Putin is a lightweight compared to Lincoln. This burns me right here. This is a fact, too. One opposition newspaper editor that Lincoln imprisoned was Francis Key Howard, the grandson of Francis Scott Key, the author of the Star-Spangled Banner. The ultimate sad irony of this incident was that Howard Key's grandson was imprisoned in Fort McHenry, the fort which the British were bombing when Key wrote what became the United States national anthem. The man who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner as the Brits were bombing Fort McHenry has his grandson imprisoned at Fort McHenry for being a newspaper editor of a paper that Lincoln didn't like. Lincoln not only imprisoned his political opponents, but in the case of Ohio Congressman Clement E. Vandelham, Lincoln had the military police arrest the congressman and had him tried before a military court. As Vandelham noted in his defense, he was a civilian, not a member of the military or militia, and therefore the court absolutely had no constitutional authority to hear his case or impose punishment. The Yankee Kangaroo Court was not impressed with Howard's appeal to limitations of the Constitution and proceeded to banish him from the United States. Putin could take lessons from Lincoln. Nevertheless, the political establishment media continue to denounce Putin while they praise and heap praise upon America's number one tyrant, Abraham Lincoln. As declared in the beginning of this article, the assessing of guilt or innocence for the belligerents of the Ukraine war is not the objective of this article. We do take note of the fact that the truth is always a victim in war. For Americans in general, and Southerners in particular, the rank hypocrisy of the Yankee Empire, not only in this war, but upon the South, as it relates to what generally referred to as aggressive abroad foreign policy, is worth studying and understanding. He also talked about despotism at home, and we have both. I thought that was good from Walter Kennedy's, Ron Kennedy, twin brother. You can get their book, The South is Right. This is from the Abbeville Institute. I think it was a good piece worth reading. There are no Shekelchats because I am doing this at like 5 in the morning U.S. time, but I wanted to get this out there. And hopefully you can be watching this on Odysee and Rumble later. Till then, peace. Fuck Lincoln. Fuck the U.S. media. I mean, they lied about Iraq. They lied about Libya. They lied about Syria. And they're lying about Ukraine. I will take a stance on this. Ukraine are belligerent. They're run by oligarchs. There was a coup d'etat in 2014. This was inevitable. They shelled Donbass. They're not in NATO, but they got NATO-trained troops, NATO weapons, NATO everything. They're de facto in NATO, except they don't have Article 4 and 5. And they're getting starched right now. But that's what happens when you keep poking a bear. Peace.